big hearty welcome to my late night show when we've got a guest who's been on before and he's back by popular acclaim. It's George Jessup. George!
Hello there.
Hi.
Yes.
George is the expert on the British comedy duo Peabody and Browning, who we've now all heard of thanks to him. George, you got a book out?
Yes, I have. If I can just correct you there, that weren't strictly speaking a British comedy duo. Browning was British, as you know. Peabody was.
He was a real hillbilly.
Well, yes, I was more American than Peabody is. Although, as you will know if you have read the book, there was a period in Peabody's career when both he and Browning were raising questions about whether they were in fact un-American, but I'll come to that later.
Yes, and it's a big if.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's a new book.
Title?
It's called Another Terrible Mistake, and
that draws you in.
Well, I shall tell you why. I mean, anybody who's stayed up to speed with the Peabody and
or
Browning
stayed up late enough to be listening to this show
will be very familiar with a very famous sketch of theirs. Peabody's on a trolley in a hospital. The medics they think he's dead. They're surrounded by medical students.
Yes.
There who
it is very comical.
Oh, it's hilarious. I love it. I listen to it repeatedly. But he's lying on this gun. But medicals, rather credulous medical students, they think he's dead. So they're a bit surprised by the sounds that emanate.
This can happen. Hair begins to grow. Nails continue growing.
Yes, the 48 hours after death, as everything sort of starts to settle down.
Indeed.
Gases are emitted. I'll leave it there.
Okay.
But actually, it turns out that he's just been asleep all along.
So that is a bad mistake.
So that's a terrible mistake.
All right. So that's the first terrible
part
mistake.
Of the. So yes, this book's called Another Terrible Mistake, and what it actually refers to is this is, if you like, the middle part of the Peabody and Browning career. Mm-hmm. They're back from the UK, where I don't know if you recall, just to bring you and your listeners up to speed. They've produced all of their major lengthy work at this point.
There was the fracas in Chelsea Arts Centre.
There was the Chelsea Arts Club, very, very famous Chelsea Arts Club show that I was present at as a young boy. Don't drink the wasp juice, the one and only performance. Yeah. Beset by difficulties.
Didn't actually reach the end.
They were back on the ship back to America pretty much the next day. Certainly they're getting back to Kennedy, they're getting back to the Cold War starting to fire up.
There is a Cold War, but there's also a wave of optimism. This young Irish lad.
Yes. He's been taken to the heart of nations liberals, and as everybody was to
despite
find out,
his family's history of tragic ill luck.
Yeah, well, yes, which yet to unfold.
Well, of course, they didn't know
fullness, of course, yes.
Just a couple had gone by then.
But yes, America, post-war America, is suddenly looking a very, very different place with different possibilities. And is this world that the Peabody and Browning, with Plum at the helm, are steaming back into on that ship?
So, what was the terrible mistake?
Well, the terrible mistake was this.
Was that the name of the thing, or is it your chapter heading?
My book about it.
They called it something different.
They didn't call it anything.
They didn't call it anything.
They just got on with doing what they were doing. There
didn't have a title.
There isn't a play or a performance called Another Terrible Mistake.
No,
it's just the title.
This is where I'm being confused. Just a minute. It's time for an advert.
You have read the book, haven't you?
Well, yes, I've flipped through it. Yes. I've got it here, Luke. I've got it here.
When you say you've flipped through it, what exactly?
I think the verb "flip through" is understandable, isn't it? I've browsed. I've had a little skim.
So okay. So maybe you can tell me what happened when they agreed to give a magazine interview to Howdy magazine.
Well, I can't read everything. I get a lot of.
So you
material.
haven't read that?
I've not, just that particular bit that you happen to have chosen.
See, the reason that I mentioned that bit in particular is that actually that's on page 10. So you don't actually have to get very far into the book to know what's happening.
I tend to read the odd numbered pages when I'm skimming.
Okay.
As they fall
okay. Well, I mean,
on the right hand side.
My recollection isn't good enough for me to remember what's on odd pages and what's on even pages.
Surprising for an expert.
Which I suspect you've been banking on, rather. Well, okay. I'm prepared to believe that you're a busy man.
Please flesh it out for me.
Well, I will. They're back in the States.
I'm busy.
Plum feels that he needs to represent themselves. The phone is not exactly ringing off the hook.
Got to reboot.
So they get back in touch with Herb Rostrom, who I don't know if you...
I remember Herb was the big wig producer.
Well, he gave them their early radio breaks, and so a lot of the material that for which Peabody and Browning are rightly revered were produced under the tutelage of Herb Rostrom, who really took them under his wing, treated them like
fledglings.
Yes, that's somewhere you might.
Well, it's the same metaphor.
If you're literally minded,
yes,
you might.
You went along an ornithological route there.
Well, yes, I did, but I think that anybody half sensible would realise that we don't now have to devote the rest of our conversation to.
However, you don't have to.
Ornithological allusion.
Just a minute. It's time for an advert. Back again now. Back here with George Jessup. He was just halfway through a sentence, George.
I mean, if you remember, it's Plum who's stolen Peabody and Browning away.
That's your thesis. The list of
so Plum turns up out of the ether, promising them the earth, dangling
usual
all
stuff.
sorts under their money, fast cars.
Did they do any drugs?
Well, no. Although having said that, Peabody was very fond of Ovaltine, which interestingly he used to snort.
Never heard of that.
No. Well, it was the 60s.
Did Browning indulge?
Well, I mean, Browning was also quite fond of Ovaltine. He used to smoke it.
So there's nothing illegal about this.
Well, it's not illegal. It's just all a bit pointless.
Well, they obviously got some benefit from it.
Well, they did, and actually, I mean, you raised the question. It's not drug taking because Ovaltine isn't a drug, which I think is fundamental. But
it's not ketamine.
No, which is a horse tranquilizer.
Yes.
But I mean, if you get a reputation for snorting Ovaltine, then
I see what happens. I see what it's the manner they take the drug, the smoking and the snorting and the injecting. That's kind of what.
Well, I don't think either of them injected Ovaltine.
They didn't.
No.
Just want to clear that up.
No. I mean,
were they wary of the law?
Well, in as much as they were wary of everything.
Okay. Any knock at the door?
They certainly were. I mean, that's an interesting question. It's, I mean, rather confused by the fact that Plum, as you know, would regularly pay a call upon them unexpectedly in disguise.
Bringing in sacks of Ovaltine with him.
So he would, under cover of darkness, obviously, but he would occasionally present himself at the doors as Sheriff Plum.
Oh, right.
And so, in as much as that invariably he would be proposing some sort of deal with them that would leave them significantly the worse off, they did come to distrust any encounter with the law.
Distrust but respect.
Yes.
Because they're not crossing that line, are they? They're not.
They were largely.
There's no tax fraud.
They were generally speaking fairly quiet, law-abiding characters.
Automobile offences.
Well, no automobile in which to commit an offence. Yes, yeah. I mean, Peabody had his tricycle, of course, and now
don't need a licence for that, though.
Well, you don't. I mean, now and again, Browning would hitch a lift, standing on the sort of the bread bin type bit at the back, which technically is a traffic offence.
You can't
because
do
you're
that.
not.
You can't do that.
You're not. But
it's probably a misdemeanour rather than a crime.
A tort.
Okay. So they got back, and Plum's had his brilliant idea. What was it?
Well, he persuaded Rostrom to do some more radio stuff with him, but of a rather different nature. more, if you like, freewheeling, not as heavily structured. They would pick up on some of the news of the day, the tropes of the day. Okay. So, for example, unfortunately, their timing was desperately poor.
Yeah.
And their fortunes plummeted miserably. When they the sketch that they done with Rostrum called the Grassy Knoll was broadcast by some desperate quirk of fate at exactly the same time that President Kennedy was being assassinated.
That is amazing. That's the bit that
in Dallas.
That's on page 11. That is the bit that I read. Yes. Tragic, really. Did Rostrum take any drugs? Ketamine? Ovaltine? I
don't know.
You're not an expert.
No, I mean that would be a different book entirely. But
I hope to read it one day.
Well, knowing a little of him, I would be very, very surprised.
It's for another man.
He was a very gentle, upstanding man.
Was he?
Herb Rostrum. Yes.
Did you meet him while you were investigating for the book?
Only through anecdote, but everything that I have heard of him. I could find somebody with a bad word to say about Herb Rostrum, apart from obviously Plum, who.
Well, I have done a little research on the personalities involved in the book. Not a lot on Herb. His fellow seal clubbers. He was a seal club. I think he was a very outstanding, upright gentleman. So nothing to contradict your assessment there.
I hadn't heard anything about clubbing seals.
Oh yes. Every year up to Canada. Just for fun.
So not to.
No, as a hobby.
Oh.
But a good bloke, as you say.
Well, I'll need to check that out. I mean, I'm not planning to write any more about Herb Rostrum.
No, Herb's just a side issue. Let's get back to Plum, Peabody and Brown. He says yes. Herb says, right, I'll give this the go ahead.
Yes, and
so
it's broadcast, and I mean, the assassination of President Kennedy, seismic.
Seismic?
A nation is in profound mourning.
Is that the pronunciation?
They had been. It's my pronunciation, yes. And are you struggling to elicit my meaning from the things that I'm saying?
Just a minute. It's time for an advert. Well, seismic. It confused me for half a second.
But then you.
Then I realised that you used it.
And you thought that was a worthy reason to interrupt the conversation. Pronunciation of specific words, despite the fact that we both understand perfectly. So
it's gone out, the people have heard it. What's the reaction?
Well, as I was trying to explain, this was an event of profound cultural importance in American life.
Well expressed.
The nation was in deep shock and mourning.
It's coming up to 2:30 now on the Charlie Foster Show.
It's 2:30.
And I can tell you that Peabody and Browning's stock, already not particularly high, plummeted desperately as a consequence.
Fancy Americans coming to Britain to make their name. Normally it's the way around, isn't it?
Well, it cuts both ways. I mean, if you look at the music industry, I mean, you would find that it was far more prevalent in the late 50s and early 60s for American acts to be coming over to the UK.
Was it now?
To perform than the other way round.
Well, you've got more strings to your bow than I would have thought.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to being a cultural historian.
Oh, that's part of it, is it?
Well, you need to be able to contextualise and compare and draw comparison.
Okay. So they did that, but it was a mistake. It was another terrible mistake.
Well, I mean, that coming to England wasn't so much the terrible mistake to which I allude. The terrible mistake was
time for a jingle.
Everybody listen up! More music
all day, every day.
Hey, this is Bruno Mars.
Hello, it's Katy Perry, and you're listening to
The terrible mistake, as I was saying, was more in Plum dragging them back across the pond to the States, not really having any clear plan for how to reintroduce Peabody and Browning to an American public which is now more at ease with television than radio, but also in a new political climate where people are
getting shot.
Well, I mean, yes, but I was going to say that where fresh ideas are being pursued. You know,
Yes.
we're no longer living in a black
Among
and
the shooting.
Peabody and Browning.
It's a new world.
They belonged, if you like, to a black and white mono world. They came back to find a stereo world of colour, not just in technological terms, but in cultural terms.
That is beautiful.
Thank you.
That's very well expressed.
Thank you very much. Did Plum seize the opportunities available to him?
I don't know.
No, he completely
weren't
completely
asking.
misread
He
the
misread
mood.
the mood.
The Grassy Knoll event was a travesty, but what happens next, unbelievably, is even worse.
That's unbelievable. Well, we should flesh out the Grassy Knoll, because that exact title was the title of the show that went out as a Grassy Knoll, for the first time ever that I know, became a major feature of history. I don't know any other Grassy Knolls.
I mean, it's possible, and this amuses
I don't know
me.
any other Knolls, to be honest.
Have you ever heard anybody mention
A Knoll?
a Grassy Knoll?
No, except
in any
that
other context?
No, I haven't. And that was the terrible
No.
mistake, wasn't it?
Well, that's, of course, you know, the coincidence of Kennedy's assassination and that, particularly that final line, you know, as the sound of the gunshot was still ricocheting off those buildings in Dallas as Peabody's final line was broadcast. Now that's what I call a Grassy Knoll. And it's a coincidence that couldn't be overlooked.
It's not a coincidence I'm familiar with. I've never heard of this show.
Well, I'll tell you what happened immediately afterwards. The whole team was hauled in to appear before a special tribunal of the House Un-American Activities.
I can only imagine there was the 50s or 60s equivalent of a Twitter storm.
Well, I have a little treat for you here, because I actually have the archive recording of Peabody's appearance before the committee. Are you Mr. Elmer Peabody? Is your name Elmer Peabody?
Sure is.
Could you answer the question yes or no, please, Mr. Peabody?
Well, it's Peabody or it's just anybody.
What
that's just
in the statement that you made, you suggest that your colleague Arthur Browning has displayed behaviour of potential harm to the American way of life.
You mean he's a little red? A little red what?
A little red what? Mr. Peabody? Would you please tell the committee what is the basis of your allegation?
Well, it's these fancy, fairy notions he's got.
Sharing. That's right. And that is the basis of your denunciation.
Is that enough?
Would you say, Mr. Peabody, that you have never shared anything?
I'm a Peabody. Ain't no Peabody never gone sharing nothing no way, young man. See this hat here? It's mine. It's mine. I ain't gonna share it.
Mr. Peabody, let us suppose that I wish to borrow what I have for a short time, since he...
No, you can't have it. You can't have it.
Let me see. How can I? Well, I mean, I don't in fact want you. Yeah.
Why not? Well, he's got a stupid name. What's that? His real name's Arthur. And he goes around calling himself Arthur. Why? Well, an old English crap like him. Recognize his name, but ain't a low-down case of infiltration or murder. I'll just anyone calls himself Arthur. Look at that entertaining fella. He plays too fast. You want to take it?
Mr. Peabody.
Mr. Careful. That's a stupid name, too.
Mr. Peabody.
Snug Peabody. Yep, that's another one. So, now we move on to what you, in your book, the Howdy magazine.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, there was rather a sour taste in the air. You know, there'd been two House of Un-American Activities Committee hearings that Peabody and Browning had appeared before, on top of which, or possibly even prompted by the business with the Grassy Knoll. I mean, this quite understandably coincided with Plum deciding that he really needed to try and force Peabody and Browning back into the public eye in a more positive kind of way. So he set up an interview with a magazine called Howdy, which at that time...
I don't know that.
Well, it's very popular in the Midwest area there. And how can I...
Oh, hello. It's like hello.
Yes,
or
yes,
hola.
absolutely, yes.
Right,
Today,
okay.
in the UK, we have... Hello. So I mean, the deal was that it'd be sort of minor celebrities, and a very sort of gushing, appreciative, uncritical stuff.
Jake Thackeray, if it was here.
Yes,
That kind of.
I guess.
So it wouldn't be Johnny Depp, would it?
No.
Jake Thackeray.
And yes, so you're looking at mostly photo spreads. It's all pretty anodyne stuff.
Is that it there?
Yes. Here, well, have a
cover. Very glossy. Very glossy, very big, bold typeface.
Yeah, it sort of disguises the cheapness of the paper. It's that
I see what you mean, yes,
that
it
sort
is.
of publication.
Right. Very Hollywood.
But anyway, I mean, just having a look through this spread.
It's on the cover there, it says, Inside the World of Peabody and Browning. What do you get when you open that up then?
Well, I mean, let's have a look, page 13.
Oh,
you wouldn't have seen that. So, yes, for example, here's...
you got a photograph, a lot of photographs.
Yes, that's the Peabody Sharpstick collection.
Oh, yeah.
And just above that, in the shoe rack, you see the
Moroccan curly slipper.
One of Browning's collection of exotic footwear. Yes, and so looking down, Peabody in the kitchen.
What's that in the through the window there? The horse?
Oh, yeah. Good Lord, you know I hadn't.
There. Look there. You see it?
You don't know it, but you're pointing at something quite extraordinary there.
Well, why? It's just a horse.
Well, it's not any old horse.
Not obviously, it's a famous horse.
Ted Beef.
Is it?
That's Peabody's horse, Ted Beef, and I tell you why this makes you so unusual. Is that horse is usually lying on its side.
Oh, I see. Normally it's blot up.
Tranquilised.
Okay.
I'm with you now.
Peabody
hates horses.
You wouldn't normally see the mane because it'd be lying down.
We would see the horse.
Or any of it.
Yeah, it'd just be lying down in the lawn.
So what's the story there then?
Don't feel that we know enough about it to make a definitive judgment.
We may never do.
We may never, and plumbers always resolutely refuse to talk about it, which is the big problem.
Can I ask you, where is $64,000 question? Where is Plum?
Well, the clever money says Buenos Aires.
Okay. And Peabody?
Rill.
Oh. In Northwest. And
yes.
I know Rill.
Yes.
Next to Prestatin.
Yes.
It's in Rill.
By all accounts, he's been spotted there, and it's been reported to me by 3 or 4 different people.
But when? You'd have thought it'd been long gone.
It's hard to pin down a precise date.
You've got to follow this up, sure.
Well, I am planning a 3rd book.
Oh God.
Which and yes, I mean I think people will be interested to know what because they're neither.
You think people will be interested?
I do think they will be interested. Yes, I'm fairly. I mean, but you must have.
I am fascinated. I'm actually more interested in the real life background story than their output.
Well, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do bit by bit. You know, with my modest resources.
Buy the book. It will be called. We've got this one's called Another Terrible Mistake.
Yes.
Let's do the next one as well. What's that going to be called?
I don't know.
Further investigations.
I don't know. I don't even have a working title for it yet. I mean, I've just started sketching out a few notes on the back of envelopes.
I need to know.
Well, perhaps you could, when the time comes, you could canvass your listeners to come up.
Everybody listen up! More music!
All day, every day.
Hey, this is Bruno Mars.